The letter trembled in Olivia Bennett's hands as the stagecoach rattled over the dusty Montana road toward Hawthorne, carrying her toward a future she had never imagined needing. The year was 1878, and she was 24 years old, a widow of 8 months, and according to the carefully worded advertisement she had answered, about to become the wife of a rancher named Zachariah Porter, who needed a woman to help run his homestead. She pressed her palm against the black fabric of her mourning dress, feeling the rapid thud of her heart beneath the whalebone stays of her corset. Everything she owned sat in 2 worn carpet bags at her feet, and everything she had lost lived in the hollow space behind her ribs where joy used to dwell. The other passengers paid her little attention, which suited her fine. An older gentleman dozed across from her, his hat pulled low over his weathered face. A younger woman with a baby kept glancing at Olivia's mourning attire with poorly concealed curiosity. But Olivia kept her gaze fixed on the window, watching the vast expanse of Montana territory roll past. The mountains rose in the distance like the backbone of some ancient sleeping giant, and the grasslands stretched endlessly under a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. She had been happy once. The memory felt like something that had happened to someone else, a story she had read in a book and then forgotten most of the details. Thomas Bennett had been a good man, a clerk in Philadelphia with prospects and a kind smile. They had married when she was 22, and for 18 months, Olivia had known what it meant to wake up each morning with purpose and contentment. Then the fever had come, swift and merciless, and within a week, Thomas was gone. Her parents had died years before in a train accident, and Thomas's family had made it clear that supporting a widowed daughter-in-law was not within their means or inclinations. So here she was, traveling to the Montana Territory to marry a stranger because the alternative was destitution or worse. The marriage broker in Philadelphia had assured her that Zachariah Porter was a respectable man, 30 years old, owner of a successful cattle ranch outside Hawthorne. He had been married before as well, the broker had mentioned almost as an afterthought, but his wife had died in childbirth 3 years prior. The baby had not survived either. Olivia wondered if grief recognized itself in others, if sorrow could sense a kindred spirit the way animals could smell fear. She wondered if that was why Zachariah Porter had specified in his advertisement that he would accept a widow, that he understood life did not always follow the paths people hoped it would. The stagecoach lurched over a particularly rough patch of road, and Olivia grabbed the edge of the seat to steady herself. The baby across from her began to fuss, and the young mother murmured soft reassurances. Olivia looked away, swallowing against the sudden tightness in her throat. She and Thomas had wanted children. They had planned for a whole houseful, had laughingly argued over names late into the night. Now those phantom children would never exist, and the thought sat like a stone in her stomach. Hawthorne appeared on the horizon, just as the sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed too beautiful for how Olivia felt inside. The town was larger than she had expected, with a main street lined with wooden buildings, false fronts making them look taller and more impressive than they actually were. She could see a general store, a saloon, what looked like a hotel, a church with a white steeple, and various other establishments. People moved along the wooden sidewalks, going about their business in the way of small towns everywhere. The stagecoach pulled to a stop in front of the general store, and the driver called out that they had reached Hawthorne. Olivia's hands felt numb as she gathered her bags. The older gentleman helped her down from the coach with old-world courtesy, tipping his hat before moving on. She stood on the side of the dusty street, clutching her bags, scanning the faces of the people nearby. She was looking for a man she had never met, would have no way of recognizing except that he was supposedly looking for her too. The marriage broker had arranged everything by letter. Zachariah Porter knew when she would arrive, knew what stage coach she would be on. She was simply supposed to wait, and he would find her. The minutes stretched out, feeling longer than they should. The other passengers dispersed, claimed by waiting family or heading into the hotel. The sun sank lower, and shadows began to creep across the street. Olivia felt the first flutter of real panic. What if he had changed his mind? What if he took one look at her and decided she would not do? She had no money for a hotel, barely had enough for a meal. She could not go back to Philadelphia. There was nothing to go back to. Mrs. Bennett. The voice came from behind her, deep and quiet. Olivia turned quickly, nearly dropping one of her bags. The man standing a few feet away was tall, with broad shoulders that filled out his simple work shirt. He wore dusty trousers tucked into well-worn boots, and a hat that shaded his face from the dying light of the sun. But what struck Olivia most were his eyes. They were a startling shade of blue-gray, like storm clouds, and they held a wariness that she recognized all too well. This was a man who had learned not to expect too much from life. "Yes," she managed. "Mr. Porter," he nodded, removing his hat. His hair was dark brown, slightly too long, curling at the ends. His face was handsome in a rugged way, with a strong jaw shadowed by a day or two of stubble and lines around his eyes that spoke of long hours in the sun. He looked older than 30, but perhaps that was just the weariness she saw in his expression. "I am sorry I was not here when the stage arrived," he said. "One of my horses threw a shoe on the way into town. I got here as quick as I could." "It is all right," Olivia said, though her heart was still racing from the fear that he might not come at all. "I have not been waiting long." This was a lie, but it seemed like the polite thing to say. Zachariah looked at her for a long moment, and Olivia felt herself being assessed. She knew what he saw. A woman of average height, too thin from the months of grief that had stolen her appetite, with brown hair pulled back in a simple style and brown eyes that probably looked as tired as she felt. She was not ugly, but she was not a beauty either. She was just ordinary, and currently she was a very sad ordinary. "I have a wagon just down the street," Zachariah said finally. "The ranch is about an hour's ride from here. We should get going before it gets full dark." He reached for her bags, and Olivia let him take them. His hands were large, calloused from work, and he handled her meager possessions with care. They walked in silence to where a sturdy wagon waited, hitched to 2 horses. Zachariah loaded her bags into the back and then offered his hand to help her up onto the seat. His grip was firm and warm, and Olivia felt the first real human contact she had had in months. He climbed up beside her and took the reins, clicking his tongue to get the horses moving. They rolled out of Hawthorne as the sun touched the horizon, and the temperature began to drop the way it did in the mountains, swift and noticeable. "You must be tired from traveling," Zachariah said after they had gone a while in silence. His eyes stayed on the road ahead. "Yes," Olivia admitted. "It has been a long journey. I imagine Philadelphia is quite different from Montana, very different, more silence." Olivia searched for something to say, something that might bridge the awkward gap between them. They were supposed to be married, after all. The arrangements had been made. "But what did you say to a stranger you were about to pledge your life to? The broker mentioned you had been widowed," Zachariah said, his voice careful, like he was stepping around something fragile. "I am sorry for your loss." The words were standard, expected, but something in his tone made them sound genuine. Olivia folded her hands in her lap, studying the black fabric of her dress. "Thank you," she said quietly. "It has been 8 months. My husband died of fever." 8 months is not very long. No, it is not. She waited for him to say something else, to offer some platitude about time healing all wounds or God's mysterious ways. Men usually did when faced with a woman's grief, as if words could somehow make it better. But Zachariah just nodded and kept his eyes on the road. "I lost my wife 3 years ago," he said after a moment. "Her name was Catherine. She died having our baby. The baby died too, a little girl." Olivia's breath caught. "I am so sorry." 3 years, he continued as if she had not spoken, "and some days it feels like it just happened. Other days, I can barely remember what her voice sounded like, and that feels worse somehow." Olivia understood exactly what he meant. The guilt of forgetting was sometimes sharper than the grief itself. "People kept telling me I would move on," Zachariah said, "that I would heal, that I would want to start over. And maybe I do want those things in a way, but not because the grief is gone. It is still there. I just got tired of carrying it alone." Something loosened in Olivia's chest, some tight knot she had been holding since Thomas died. Here was someone who understood. Here was someone who was not going to expect her to pretend to be over it, to smile and move on as if the past could just be erased. "I feel like I am betraying him," she admitted, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "Coming here, agreeing to marry someone else. Like I am saying he did not matter." Zachariah glanced at her then, really looked at her, and his eyes were kind. "He mattered," he said simply. "Catherine mattered. They both mattered, and nothing we do now changes that. We are not replacing them. We are just trying to keep living." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes, the first real tears she had allowed herself in weeks. She blinked them back, not wanting to fall apart in front of this man she barely knew, but her throat was too tight to speak. They rode in silence for a while longer, but it was a different kind of silence now. Less awkward, more companionable. The landscape around them was beautiful in the fading light, all rolling hills and scattered trees, with the mountains standing sentinel in the distance. The air smelled of grass and dust, and something wild that Olivia could not name. "I want you to know," Zachariah said as they turned onto a narrower road that led through a stand of cottonwoods. "I am not expecting anything from you that you are not ready to give. I know this is not a normal situation. We can take things slow. Figure out how to be married without rushing anything." Olivia felt heat rise in her cheeks. She had tried not to think too much about the physical aspects of marriage, about sharing a home and a bed with a man she did not know. It was part of the arrangement, she understood that, but the thought made her anxious. "Thank you," she said. "I appreciate that. We will work it out," Zachariah said, "one day at a time." The ranch came into view as they crested a small rise. It was modest but well kept, with a 2-story wooden house, a large barn, several outbuildings, and fenced pastures where Olivia could see cattle grazing in the dimming light. Smoke rose from the chimney, suggesting someone had started a fire inside. "It is not fancy," Zachariah said, and Olivia heard something uncertain in his voice, like he was worried she might find it lacking. "But it is solid. Good land, good water. The house has 3 bedrooms upstairs and a kitchen and sitting room downstairs. I have a man who helps with the cattle. Name is Rafael Martinez. He has a place of his own about a mile south, but he comes by most days. His wife, Maria, she has been helping keep the house from falling into complete disaster since I have been on my own. She said she would make sure there was food ready for tonight." He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house, and Olivia looked at what was to be her new home. It was bigger than the apartment she had shared with Thomas in Philadelphia, and somehow that made her feel guilty all over again. But it also looked welcoming in a way she had not expected, with curtains in the windows and a rocking chair on the porch. Zachariah helped her down from the wagon and retrieved her bags. "I will show you around," he said. "You can pick which bedroom you want. I have been using the one at the front of the house, but you can have any of them." The fact that he was already planning on separate bedrooms made Olivia feel relieved and grateful. She followed him up the porch steps and through the front door into a sitting room that was surprisingly tidy. There was a sofa, 2 chairs, a fireplace with a fire burning low, and a table with an oil lamp. Everything was simple but clean. "Kitchen is through there," Zachariah said, pointing to a doorway. "Stairs are here." He led her upstairs, where a narrow hallway connected 3 rooms. He showed her the one at the front, which was clearly his, with a large bed and masculine furniture. Then he showed her the other 2. One was completely empty. The other had a bed with a simple quilt, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the pastures. "This one was going to be the nursery," Zachariah said quietly, standing in the doorway of the furnished room. "But it has been empty since. You are welcome to it, or you can take the other one, whatever you prefer." Olivia looked at the room that had been meant for a child who never got to live in it and felt the weight of all that loss, hers and his, pressing down on her shoulders. "I will take this one," she said, "if that is all right." Zachariah nodded and set her bags just inside the door. "I will leave you to get settled. Like I said, Maria left food downstairs. Come down whenever you are ready and we can eat something." He left, his footsteps heavy on the stairs, and Olivia was alone in the room that was supposed to be a nursery. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked around at the simple furnishings, at the window that would let in the Montana sunlight, at the empty dresser waiting for her few belongings. She thought about Thomas, about the life they had planned that would never happen. She thought about this stranger downstairs who had lost just as much as she had, maybe more. She thought about the fact that in the morning they would go into town and stand before a preacher and speak vows that would bind them together for the rest of their lives. And she thought about what Zachariah had said. They were not replacing the people they had lost. They were just trying to keep living. It was not the love story she had imagined for herself, but maybe it was the one she needed. After washing her face and hands in the basin, and changing out of her travel dusty dress into another one that was only slightly less wrinkled, Olivia made her way downstairs. She found Zachariah in the kitchen, setting out plates and utensils on a simple wooden table. A pot sat on the stove, and the smell of stew filled the air, rich and savory. "Maria makes the best stew in the territory," Zachariah said, ladling generous portions into bowls. "She has been worried about me wasting away on my own cooking." They sat across from each other at the table, and Olivia realized she was actually hungry for the first time in weeks. The stew was indeed delicious, full of beef and vegetables and thick gravy. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, aware of Zachariah watching her with something like relief. "It is good," she said. "Please tell Mrs. Martinez thank you. She will be glad to hear it. She has been excited about you coming. I think she is hoping for some female company." "How long have they worked for you?" "Raphael has been here about 5 years. He is the best hand with cattle I have ever seen. Maria does not work for me exactly, but she has been kind enough to help out when I needed it. They have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl." Olivia nodded, filing away this information. These would be the people she would see regularly, the closest thing to neighbors out here. "What about your family?" she asked. "Are they nearby?" Zachariah's expression darkened slightly. "My father died when I was young. My mother remarried and moved to California. We do not keep in touch much. I have a brother somewhere, but we have not spoken in years. Catherine's family wanted nothing to do with me after she died. They blamed me for what happened." "That is not fair," Olivia said. You cannot blame someone for that. No, but people need someone to blame when something goes wrong. It is easier than accepting that sometimes terrible things just happen for no reason at all. He was right, of course. Olivia had seen it herself, the way people had looked at her after Thomas died, like she must have done something wrong, must have failed to take care of him properly. As if fever cared about how much someone was loved, they finished eating in comfortable quiet, and Zachariah insisted on cleaning up despite Olivia's offer to help. "You have traveled all day," he said. "You should rest. Tomorrow will be busy." Tomorrow they would be married. The thought felt surreal. Olivia excused herself and went back upstairs to her room. She prepared for bed, braiding her hair and changing into her nightgown, and then she lay in the unfamiliar bed and stared at the ceiling. The house was quiet except for the occasional creak of wood settling and the distant sound of cattle lowing. Through the window, she could see more stars than she had ever seen in Philadelphia, the whole sky dusted with light. She thought about Zachariah downstairs, probably sitting by the fire, and wondered if he was as uncertain about all of this as she was. He seemed like a good man, steady and honest. He had not tried to hide his grief or pretend that everything was fine. He had acknowledged the strangeness of their situation without making it worse. Maybe that was enough to build something on. Maybe not love, not the kind she had with Thomas, but something solid and real nonetheless. Sleep came eventually, fitful and full of dreams she could not quite remember when she woke to sunlight streaming through the window. The morning was a blur of activity. Zachariah had already been up for hours. He told her over breakfast, taking care of the animals and the various tasks that came with running a ranch. He had cleaned up and changed into nicer clothes, a white shirt and a vest that looked like they did not get worn very often. Olivia put on her best dress, which was still black but made of nicer fabric, with a fitted bodice and a full skirt. She pinned her hair up carefully and looked at herself in the small mirror over the dresser. She looked tired, she thought. Tired and thin and sad. But this was who she was now. There was no point in pretending otherwise. They took the wagon back into Hawthorne, and the ride felt different in daylight. Olivia could see the ranch properly now, see how much work Zachariah had put into it. The fences were well maintained, the buildings sturdy. This was the home of someone who cared about what he had built in town. Zachariah drove directly to the church. The preacher, a kindly man named Reverend Walsh, was expecting them. The ceremony would be simple, he explained, just the necessary words to make it legal and proper. They would need witnesses, but he had already arranged for 2 members of the congregation to serve. The church was small inside, with rows of simple wooden pews and a cross on the wall behind the pulpit. The witnesses turned out to be an older couple, Mr. and Mrs. Thornton, who smiled at Olivia with warm curiosity. Standing at the front of the church next to Zachariah, Olivia felt disconnected from her own body, like she was watching this happen to someone else. The Reverend began speaking, his voice resonating in the quiet space, talking about marriage and commitment and God's plan. Olivia barely heard him. She was too aware of Zachariah standing beside her, solid and real, about to become her husband. When it came time for the vows, Zachariah turned to face her and took her hands in his. His palms were warm and rough with calluses, and he held her hands gently, like he was afraid of hurting her. "I, Zachariah Porter, take you, Olivia Bennett, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said, his voice steady. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. Until death do us part." The words hit Olivia hard, reminding her of standing in another church, speaking the same vows to Thomas, believing they would have a lifetime together. And here she was, speaking them again to someone else, someone she barely knew. But when she looked into Zachariah's eyes, she saw understanding there. He knew exactly what this meant, how hard it was to promise forever again when forever had already been broken once. I, Olivia Bennett, take you, Zachariah Porter, to be my lawfully wedded husband, she said, her voice softer than his but just as steady. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. There were no rings. Neither of them had thought to arrange for that detail, and it seemed somehow fitting. This was not that kind of marriage, not yet. This was an arrangement, a practical solution to loneliness and need. But when Reverend Walsh pronounced them husband and wife, and Zachariah leaned down to kiss her, his lips brushing against hers in the briefest, most chaste of kisses, Olivia felt something shift inside her chest. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of it. The hope that maybe, eventually, this could become something more than just two lonely people sharing a house. The Thorntons congratulated them warmly, and Mrs. Thornton insisted on giving Olivia a jar of her homemade preserves as a wedding gift. Zachariah thanked them and the Reverend, and then they were back outside in the bright Montana morning, officially married. "We should stop at the general store," Zachariah said as they walked back to the wagon. "You will need some things for the house. And we can get whatever supplies you think we need." The general store was a revelation. Olivia had not been inside a proper store since leaving Philadelphia, and this one, while smaller, was packed with everything imaginable. Bolts of fabric, canned goods, tools, rope, ammunition, medicines, and 100 other items lined the shelves and hung from the walls. The proprietor, a cheerful man named Mr. Dawson, greeted Zachariah by name and looked at Olivia with open curiosity. "This is my wife, Olivia," Zachariah said, and Olivia felt a strange thrill at hearing herself called that. "We just got married this morning." "Well, congratulations," Mr. Dawson boomed. "It is about time someone got you settled down again, Zach. You have been rattling around that ranch by yourself for too long." Zachariah looked faintly embarrassed but smiled. "We need to pick up some supplies." Of course. You take your time, look around. Anything you need, just let me know." Olivia wandered the store, overwhelmed by choices after months of having nothing. Zachariah followed patiently, agreeing to everything she suggested and adding items of his own. They bought flour and sugar, coffee and tea, dried beans, canned peaches, fabric for new curtains, thread, needles, a new skillet, and a dozen other things. Zachariah paid without blinking at the total, and Mr. Dawson helped them load everything into the wagon. "You take care of him," Mr. Dawson said to Olivia in a stage whisper as they were leaving. "He is a good man, but he has been too sad for too long." Olivia nodded, unsure how to respond to that. She was too sad for too long as well. Maybe that was the point. They stopped at the hotel restaurant for lunch, and Olivia was introduced to several more townspeople who came over to congratulate them. Everyone seemed genuinely pleased that Zachariah had remarried, and they welcomed Olivia with warmth that surprised her. In Philadelphia, she had been largely invisible after Thomas died, a reminder of tragedy that people preferred to avoid. After lunch, they headed back to the ranch. The day had warmed up considerably, and Olivia removed her shawl, enjoying the feel of the sun on her face. The landscape was so different from Pennsylvania, so open and vast. It was a little frightening, but also exhilarating in a way she had not expected. Back at the ranch, they spent the afternoon putting away supplies and settling into the rhythm of the household. Maria Martinez stopped by briefly. a whirlwind of energy and Spanish-accented English, welcoming Olivia effusively and promising to come by the next day to help with anything she needed. She was a small, round woman with a bright smile and kind eyes, and Olivia liked her immediately. Raphael came by as well, a quiet man with a weather-beaten face and a courteous manner. He tipped his hat to Olivia and offered his congratulations before heading off with Zachariah to check on something with the cattle. Left alone in the house, Olivia explored more thoroughly. The kitchen was well stocked now with the supplies they had bought. The sitting room was comfortable, clearly lived in. Upstairs, she unpacked her bags, hanging her few dresses in the wardrobe and placing her other belongings in the dresser. She had brought a photograph of Thomas, carefully wrapped in cloth to protect it, and she hesitated before setting it on the dresser. Would Zachariah mind having a photograph of her dead husband in the house? But then she remembered what he had said about Catherine, about how they were not trying to replace the people they had lost. She set the photograph out, Thomas's serious face staring back at her from the frame, and felt like she could breathe a little easier. Dinner that night was a simple affair, just bread and cold meat and some of the preserves Mrs. Thornton had given them. They ate at the kitchen table, and Olivia found herself relaxing more, asking Zachariah questions about the ranch and listening to him talk about his work. He had a calm way of speaking, thoughtful and deliberate, and she found she enjoyed listening to him. "Tomorrow I need to ride out to the north pasture," he said. "Check on the herd. You are welcome to come if you want, or you can stay here and rest. I know this has all been a lot." "I would like to come," Olivia said, surprising herself, "if I would not be in the way." "You would not be in the way. It would be good for you to see the ranch, and I think the ride would do you good. Do you know how to ride? A little. It has been a while. We will take it slow." That night, lying in her bed, Olivia felt the strangeness of her new situation settle over her. She was married again. She lived in Montana now. She had a husband sleeping in a room down the hall, a man she barely knew but who had somehow made her feel less alone than she had felt in months. It was not the life she had planned, but maybe that was all right. Maybe planned lives were overrated anyway. The next morning dawned clear and bright, and after breakfast, Zachariah saddled 2 horses. Olivia had not ridden in years, not since she was a girl visiting her aunt's farm, but the horse Zachariah chose for her was a gentle bay mare named Daisy, who seemed content to plod along at a steady pace. They rode out across the grasslands, following a rough trail that led north. The sun climbed higher and the air grew warm. Olivia could see cattle scattered across the pasture, grazing peacefully. In the distance, the mountains rose up, still capped with snow despite the spring weather. "It is beautiful here," Olivia said, pulling Daisy to a stop at the top of a small rise. "I never imagined country like this." Zachariah stopped beside her, his horse stamping impatiently. "It grows on you," he said. "When I first came out here, I thought it was too empty, too wild, but after a while you start to see the beauty in it, the space, the freedom." "Why did you come here?" "To Montana. I was looking for a fresh start. After my father died, things were hard. I worked various jobs, saved up, and decided to head west. Bought this land cheap because nobody else wanted it, built the ranch from nothing. Met Catherine in town a few years later. She was a school teacher, came out from Ohio. We got married, and I thought I had it all figured out, thought I knew how life would go." He went quiet, staring out at the horizon. Olivia waited, sensing there was more he wanted to say. "When she died," he continued finally, "I thought about leaving. Selling the ranch and going somewhere else, somewhere that did not have her ghost in every room. But I realized that was not going to help. The grief would follow me, so I stayed. I kept working. And eventually it got a little bit easier to wake up in the morning." "Is it easier now?" Olivia asked quietly. Zachariah looked at her, really looked at her, and there was something raw in his expression. "It is different now," he said. "Having you here, it is different. I would not say better yet because that feels like I am betraying her memory, but different, less empty." Olivia understood exactly what he meant. "I feel the same way," she admitted. "I felt guilty agreeing to come here, like I was abandoning Thomas. But then I realized I could not spend the rest of my life mourning. He would not have wanted that. He would have wanted me to keep living." "Catherine would have wanted that for me too," Zachariah said. "She was always pushing me to be happy, to enjoy life. She would probably be glad I finally decided to try again." They rode on, checking the cattle and making sure everything was in order. Zachariah was patient with Olivia's rusty riding skills, and by the time they headed back to the house in the afternoon, she felt more confident in the saddle. Her legs ached and she knew she would be sore tomorrow, but it felt good to have done something physical, to have been useful. Over the following weeks, Olivia settled into life on the ranch. Maria came by several times a week, teaching Olivia how to cook on the big wood stove, how to preserve food, how to make soap and candles. The two women became friends quickly, bonding over shared work and easy conversation. Maria talked about her children with obvious pride, and Olivia found herself enjoying the stories even though they made her heart ache for what she would never have with Thomas. Raphael was a steadier presence, quiet but helpful, always willing to explain ranch work to Olivia when she asked. He seemed to approve of her, which Olivia took as a good sign. She learned that he and Maria had worked hard to make a life out here, that they had faced prejudice and hardship but had persevered. And then there was Zachariah. He was unfailingly kind, always considerate, giving Olivia space when she needed it and company when she wanted it. They fell into an easy routine, eating breakfast together, going their separate ways during the day, coming back together for dinner. They talked in the evenings, sitting by the fire or on the porch when the weather was nice, sharing stories about their lives, their pasts, their losses. Slowly, carefully, they were building something. Not love, not yet, but friendship. Trust, the foundation for something more. One evening about a month after Olivia had arrived, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset when Zachariah said, "I am glad you came here. I know this was not what either of us planned, but I am glad." Olivia looked at him, at his profile in the fading light, and felt a warmth bloom in her chest. "I am glad too," she said, and she meant it. He reached over and took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, and they sat like that until the stars came out, holding hands and watching the night sky. Two damaged people learning how to be whole again. The turning point came on a hot day in July. Olivia had been at the ranch for 3 months, and she had grown to love the rhythm of life there, the hard work and simple pleasures. She had made new curtains for the sitting room, planted a vegetable garden behind the house, learned to make bread that Zachariah claimed was the best he had ever tasted. She felt useful here in a way she had not felt in Philadelphia, even before Thomas died. She and Zachariah had grown closer as well, their conversations deepening, their silences becoming more comfortable. He still slept in his room and she in hers, but there were more touches now, casual and brief but meaningful. His hand on her back as he passed behind her in the kitchen. Her fingers brushing his when they both reached for something at the same time. Small things, but they added up. On this particular day, Zachariah had gone into town for supplies, and Olivia was alone at the house. She had been kneading dough for bread when she heard a noise outside, a commotion from the direction of the barn. Setting the dough aside, she wiped her hands on her apron and went to investigate. One of the horses, a young stallion that Zachariah was training, had gotten out of his stall somehow and was running loose in the yard, clearly agitated. As Olivia watched, he reared up, hooves flashing, and kicked at the fence. She knew she should wait for Zachariah to come back, that she did not have the experience to handle this. But the horse was going to hurt himself or damage something, and who knew when Zachariah would return. Taking a deep breath, Olivia approached slowly, talking in a low, calm voice the way she had seen Zachariah and Raphael do. The horse tossed his head and danced away, but he did not bolt. She kept talking, kept walking slowly, and eventually she was close enough to grab his halter. He tried to pull away, but she held firm, continuing to speak softly, stroking his neck with her free hand. It took several minutes, but the horse eventually calmed down, his breathing slowing, his muscles relaxing. Olivia led him back to the barn, to his stall, and secured the door properly this time. Her hands were shaking, she realized. She had been more frightened than she had let herself acknowledge. She was just closing the barn door when she heard the wagon. Zachariah drove into the yard, and from his expression he could tell something had happened. "What is wrong?" he asked, jumping down before the wagon had fully stopped. "You are pale." "The stallion got out," Olivia said. "I got him back in his stall. Everything is fine." Zachariah stared at her. "You caught him yourself." "I did not know when you would be back, and he was going to hurt himself. I just did what I have seen you do." To her surprise, Zachariah pulled her into a hug, his arms wrapping around her tightly. "You could have been hurt," he said into her hair. "That horse is not fully trained. If he had kicked you." "But he did not," Olivia said, her voice muffled against his chest. She realized this was the first time they had embraced like this, and she could feel the solid warmth of him, the rapid beating of his heart. "I am fine." Zachariah pulled back enough to look at her, his hands on her shoulders. "You are braver than you think," he said. "Most people would have just let him run." "I was terrified the whole time," Olivia admitted, "but you did it anyway. That is what bravery is." They stood there for a moment, so close Olivia could see the flecks of gold in his blue-gray eyes. She thought he might kiss her, really kiss her this time, not the chaste brush of lips from their wedding day. She thought she might want him to, but he stepped back, his hands dropping to his sides. "I should unload these supplies," he said, his voice a little rough, "and check on that horse." The moment passed, but it left something changed between them. That night at dinner, Zachariah kept looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. After they had cleaned up, he suggested they sit on the porch, and Olivia agreed. The night was warm and clear, with a million stars overhead. They sat in the two rocking chairs Zachariah had built, moving gently back and forth in comfortable silence. "I have been thinking," Zachariah said after a while, "about us, about this arrangement." Olivia's heart sped up. "What about it? When you came here, I told you we would take things slow, that I would not expect anything you were not ready for, and I meant that. I still mean it." "But—" He turned to look at her. "But somewhere along the way, this stopped feeling like an arrangement to me. You stopped being just someone to help run the household. You became someone I look forward to seeing every morning, someone I think about when I am out working, someone I want to talk to at the end of the day." Olivia's breath caught. She had been feeling the same way but had been afraid to acknowledge it, afraid that wanting to move forward meant betraying Thomas. "I am not saying I expect anything to change," Zachariah continued quickly. "I just wanted you to know, I care about you, Olivia, more than I thought I would, more than I thought I could after Catherine." "I care about you too," Olivia said softly. "It scares me sometimes how much I have come to care about you. I feel like I am betraying Thomas by feeling happy again." Zachariah reached over and took her hand. "He would want you to be happy, you know he would." "I know, and Catherine would want the same for you. So maybe we can stop feeling guilty about it," Zachariah said. "Maybe we can let ourselves have this, whatever this becomes." Olivia squeezed his hand. "I would like that." They sat there holding hands, rocking gently, and Olivia felt something settle into place inside her. This was not the same as what she had with Thomas. It would never be the same because Zachariah was not Thomas. But it was good in its own way, maybe even better because they both understood loss, both understood the preciousness of second chances. "I am not very good at this," Zachariah said after a while. "At courting. Catherine and we were young. Everything was easy. But I am older now, and this is complicated, and I do not know the right things to say or do." "You are doing fine," Olivia assured him. "Better than fine. Would it be all right if I kissed you, properly I mean, not like at the wedding?" Olivia felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she nodded. "Yes, that would be all right." Zachariah stood and pulled her gently to her feet. He cupped her face in his hands, his palms rough and warm against her skin, and looked at her for a long moment. Then he leaned down and kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, like he was afraid of pushing too hard too fast. But when Olivia leaned into him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, he deepened the kiss. It was nothing like kissing Thomas had been, and yet it was wonderful in its own way. Different but good. Very good. When they finally broke apart, both breathing a little harder, Zachariah rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted. "So have I," Olivia whispered. That night, she lay in her bed with her fingers pressed to her lips, still feeling the phantom pressure of his kiss. She looked at Thomas's photograph on the dresser and felt a pang of the old grief, but it was softer now, less sharp. She would always love Thomas, would always carry him with her. But she could love Zachariah too. Her heart was big enough for both. After that night, things changed between them in subtle but significant ways. Zachariah became more affectionate, finding excuses to touch her, to be near her. He kissed her good morning and good night, held her hand when they sat together, wrapped his arm around her waist when they walked. Olivia welcomed it all, returning his affections, surprised at how much she had missed physical closeness. They talked about moving into the same room, but both agreed they were not quite ready for that yet. There was no rush. They had time. Summer turned to fall, and the work on the ranch shifted with the seasons. There was hay to put up, cattle to move to different pastures, fences to repair before winter. Olivia helped where she could, learning more about ranch life every day. She discovered she was good at keeping the books, at managing the household accounts, and Zachariah gratefully turned that task over to her. Maria and Olivia grew even closer, and Olivia found herself confiding in the other woman about her growing feelings for Zachariah. Maria was delighted, declaring that it was about time both of them found happiness again. Raphael, more taciturn, simply nodded his approval when Olivia mentioned it to him one day while helping with the horses. The first snow came in late October, dusting the mountains and the grasslands with white. Olivia stood on the porch wrapped in a shawl, watching the flakes fall, feeling a contentment she had not experienced in years. This place had become home. These people had become her family. And Zachariah had become her husband in truth, not just in name. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Are you warm enough?" he asked. "I am perfect," Olivia said, leaning back against him. "I was thinking," Zachariah said carefully, "maybe it is time we became a real married couple in every sense. If you are ready, if you want that." Olivia turned in his arms so she could see his face. His expression was open and vulnerable, and she realized this was hard for him too. Moving forward meant letting go a little more of the past, and that was never easy. "I am ready," she said. "I want that. I want you." The relief and joy that crossed his face made her heart swell. He kissed her, deeply and thoroughly, and Olivia felt heat bloom through her body in a way she had not felt since Thomas. That night, Zachariah came to her room, and they came together with a tenderness that made Olivia's eyes sting with tears. He was careful with her, patient, making sure she was comfortable every step of the way. And when it was over, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Zachariah's arms around her, her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," Zachariah whispered into the darkness. "I did not think I could feel this way again, but I do. I love you, Olivia." "I love you too," Olivia said, the words feeling right and true. "I never thought I would be able to say that to anyone but Thomas, but here we are. I love you, Zachariah." He held her tighter, and Olivia felt something heal inside her, some wound she had not even realized was still open. She would always carry grief with her, would always remember what she had lost. But Zachariah had promised to carry it with her, and he had kept that promise. He had not asked her to forget Thomas or to stop mourning. He had simply walked beside her through the grief, offering his own to keep her company, until one day she looked up and realized the weight was lighter because they were carrying it together. Winter settled in earnest, cold and fierce. Snow piled up around the ranch, and the work became harder, just keeping the animals fed and watered and safe from predators. Zachariah moved his things into Olivia's room, and they shared the bed every night, finding warmth and comfort in each other. On the longest night of the year, when the darkness seemed to press in from all sides, they sat by the fire and talked about the people they had lost. Olivia told Zachariah stories about Thomas, about their courtship and marriage, about the dreams they had shared. Zachariah told her about Catherine, about the ranch they had built together, about the daughter they never got to raise. They cried together, mourning what could have been, and then they held each other and talked about what they had now, what they were building together. "I feel like I have two lives," Olivia said, her voice soft in the firelit room. "The one before with Thomas and this one now with you, and both of them are real, both of them matter." "Two lives," Zachariah echoed. "I like that. We have been given the gift of a second life." "Not everyone gets that." "We are lucky," Olivia said. "We are," Zachariah agreed. "Even with all the pain and loss, we are lucky to have this." Spring came again, the snow melting, the grass turning green. Olivia's garden, which had died back over the winter, began to show signs of life. She planted new seeds, planning for the summer harvest. The cattle, lean from the hard winter, began to fatten up on the new grass. Life returned to the land, and with it came a sense of renewal. One morning in April, Olivia woke feeling ill. She barely made it to the wash basin before she was sick, her stomach heaving. Zachariah, alarmed, wanted to ride for the doctor immediately, but Olivia stopped him. "I think I know what this is," she said, her hand pressed to her stomach. It took a moment for understanding to dawn on his face. "You mean?" "I am not certain yet, but I think so." The joy that lit up his face was almost painful to see. "A baby," he whispered. "Maybe. I need to wait a little longer to be sure." But Olivia was sure. Her body told her what her mind was almost afraid to hope. After all the loss, after all the grief, maybe life was offering them this gift. Over the next few weeks, as the signs became undeniable, Olivia allowed herself to believe it. She was carrying a child, Zachariah's child. Maria confirmed it with the surety of a woman who had been through it herself 3 times, and she swept Olivia into a hug so tight Olivia could barely breathe. "This is such good news," Maria exclaimed. "The house will have a baby in it again. Oh, Olivia, I am so happy for you both." Zachariah was beside himself with excitement and worry. He fussed over Olivia constantly, trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work, insisting she rest more. Olivia tolerated it with amusement, knowing it came from a place of love and fear. She understood his fear. He had lost Catherine and their baby. The memory of that loss had to haunt him now. One night, about 2 months into the pregnancy, Zachariah confessed his fears as they lay in bed together. "I cannot stop thinking about what happened with Catherine," he said. "I know it is probably unlikely to happen again, but I am terrified, Olivia. I cannot lose you. I cannot lose another child." "You will not lose me," Olivia said, even though she knew she could not promise that, not really. Childbirth was dangerous. Women died. Babies died. But she needed him to believe it would be different this time. "I am strong. I will be fine. We will be fine." "I should have said this to you before," Zachariah said, his voice breaking, "about the grief. When I told you I would carry it with you, I meant it, but I realize now it goes both ways. You have been carrying my grief too, all my fear and sadness about Catherine and the baby I lost. You have carried it with me without complaint." "That is what we do," Olivia said, taking his face in her hands. "We carry each other's burdens. That is what love is. I do not deserve you." "Yes, you do. We both deserve this happiness. We both deserve this second chance." As the months passed and Olivia's belly grew round, the ranch prepared for the arrival of the new baby. Maria helped Olivia sew tiny clothes and blankets. Raphael built a beautiful wooden cradle, working on it in his spare time and presenting it with shy pride. Zachariah transformed the third bedroom, the one that had been empty, into a proper nursery, painting the walls and building shelves for toys and books. The baby was due in late November, and as the date approached, Zachariah became increasingly anxious. He insisted that Maria move into the house for the last few weeks, just in case, and Maria agreed with understanding. She had seen his fear, had known Catherine, and witnessed his grief. The labor started on a cold night in mid-November, 3 weeks before Olivia had expected. She woke to cramping pain and wet sheets and knew instantly what was happening. "Zachariah," she said, shaking him awake, "the baby is coming." He was up instantly, his face pale in the lamplight. "It is too early. Should I ride for the doctor?" said Raphael. "You are not leaving me." Raphael rode through the dark to fetch the doctor while Maria took charge, boiling water and preparing the bedroom. Zachariah stayed by Olivia's side, holding her hand, his face drawn with worry. The labor progressed quickly, faster than anyone expected, and the baby arrived before the doctor did, slipping into Maria's competent hands with a lusty cry that filled the house. "A boy," Maria announced, her face split with a huge smile. "A beautiful, healthy boy." Zachariah's face crumpled with relief and joy. Olivia was crying too, reaching for the baby as Maria cleaned him quickly and wrapped him in a soft blanket. She placed the tiny, red-faced bundle in Olivia's arms, and Olivia looked down at her son and felt a rush of love so powerful it nearly took her breath away. "Look what we made," she whispered to Zachariah, who was staring at the baby with wonder. "Look at him." "He is perfect," Zachariah said hoarsely. He reached out a tentative finger and the baby wrapped his tiny fist around it. "Hello, son. I am your father." The words made Olivia cry harder. She thought about Thomas, about the children they never had. She thought about Catherine and the baby girl who never got to live. So much loss, so much grief. But here was new life, new hope. The cycle continuing despite everything. When the doctor finally arrived, huffing from the cold ride, he examined both Olivia and the baby and declared them healthy. "You did well, Mrs. Porter," he said. "Both of you did well." After everyone had left and it was just the 3 of them, Zachariah climbed carefully into bed beside Olivia and they looked at their son together. "What should we name him?" Olivia asked. Zachariah was quiet for a moment. "Would you think it wrong if I wanted to give him a new name? Not after anyone we lost, but something that is just his. I think that is perfect, Olivia said. He is not a replacement for anyone. He is himself. How about Samuel? Zachariah suggested. Samuel Porter, it means heard by God. Samuel, Olivia tested the name. Yes, I like that. Samuel, because God heard our prayers for a second chance. Samuel, Zachariah repeated, kissing the baby's downy head. Welcome to the world, Samuel Porter. Your mother and I have been waiting for you. The baby, Samuel, made a small noise, and Olivia guided him to her breast, helping him latch on. It felt miraculous. This tiny person who had not existed a year ago, who was part her and part Zachariah, but entirely his own person. Zachariah watched them with an expression of such love and contentment that Olivia felt her heart might burst. This man who had promised to carry her grief with her had given her so much more. He had given her a home, a family, a reason to wake up in the morning with hope instead of dread. He had given her love when she thought she would never feel it again. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For finding me, for bringing me here, for loving me even with all my sadness and broken pieces. You were never broken, Zachariah said, just hurt, and you did the same for me. You took a grief-stricken rancher who had given up on happiness and showed him that life was still worth living. We saved each other, Olivia said. We did, Zachariah agreed, and we made this. He gestured to Samuel, who had fallen asleep nursing, his tiny face peaceful. The years that followed were full and rich in ways Olivia had never imagined. Samuel grew into a sturdy, happy child with his father's eyes and his mother's smile. The ranch prospered, expanding with strategic purchases and good fortune. Raphael and Maria became more family than employees, their children playing with Samuel and filling the house with laughter. When Samuel was 3, Olivia found herself pregnant again. This time she was less fearful, though Zachariah still worried constantly. Their second child, a daughter they named Rose, arrived on a spring morning when the wildflowers were blooming across the grasslands. She had dark hair like Olivia and a stubborn temperament that reminded everyone of her father. 2 years after Rose came another son, James, who was quiet and thoughtful from the start, content to observe the world around him before jumping in. The house that had been so empty and quiet when Olivia first arrived was now full of noise and life and love. Children's laughter rang through the rooms. Toys littered the floors. Chaos reigned, and it was beautiful on winter evenings when the children were asleep and the house was finally quiet. Olivia and Zachariah would sit by the fire, and sometimes they would talk about the people they had lost. The grief never completely disappeared. It was always there, woven into who they were, but it no longer dominated their lives. It had become just one thread in the larger tapestry of their existence. You ever regret it? Zachariah asked one such evening. Coming here, marrying me. Never, Olivia said without hesitation. Do you regret taking a chance on a sad widow from Philadelphia? Not for a single moment. They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands the way they had that first night on the porch when everything was still new and uncertain. I loved Thomas, Olivia said. I will always love him. He was my first love, and he gave me happy memories I will cherish forever. And I loved Catherine, Zachariah said. She made me believe in happiness. But I love you too, Olivia continued. Differently, but just as deeply. Maybe more, because I know how precious it is now, how easily it can be lost. I love you more than I thought I could love anyone, Zachariah said. You and the children, you are my second chance, my second life, and I am grateful for it every single day. 2 lives, Olivia echoed, remembering their conversation from years ago. We are living our second lives, and they are good lives, Zachariah said. They are, Olivia agreed, As the children grew older, they learned the stories of the people who had come before them. Samuel, Rose, and James knew about their Uncle Thomas and Aunt Catherine, the ones who had died before they were born. They knew that grief was part of life, that loss was inevitable, but that love was stronger than both. The ranch continued to thrive under Zachariah's careful management and Olivia's keen business sense. They hired more help as the children grew, teaching their sons and daughter how to work the land, how to care for the animals, how to build something lasting. Samuel showed an aptitude for working with horses. Rose had her mother's head for figures and loved helping with the books. James, the quiet one, surprised everyone by showing artistic talent, filling notebooks with sketches of the ranch and the Montana landscape. Maria and Raphael's children grew alongside the Porter children, and the two families became inextricably linked. When Raphael's eldest son married, Zachariah and Olivia stood as witnesses. When Maria's daughter had her first baby, Olivia was there to help, passing on the knowledge Maria had once shared with her. The town of Hawthorne grew too, adding new businesses and new families. The railroad finally came through, connecting them more easily to the rest of the country. Progress marched on, but some things stayed the same. The land remained vast and beautiful. The seasons turned in their eternal cycle, and the people who called Montana home remained hardy and resilient. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Zachariah surprised Olivia with a ring, something he had commissioned from a jeweler in town. It was simple gold with a small diamond, nothing extravagant, but Olivia burst into tears when he slipped it on her finger. "I should have given you this 10 years ago," he said, "but better late than never." "It is perfect," Olivia said, holding up her hand to watch the diamond catch the light. "You are perfect. I am far from perfect, perfect for me then." They celebrated with a party, inviting everyone they knew. The house was packed with friends and neighbors, with music and dancing and food. The children ran wild, high on cake and excitement. Maria cried happy tears and declared it the best party she had ever attended. Late in the evening, when most of the guests had left and the children had finally collapsed into exhausted sleep, Olivia and Zachariah slipped outside to the porch. The stars were brilliant overhead, and the air was cool and clear. "You remember the first night we sat out here?" Zachariah asked. "When I told you I cared about you, I remember," Olivia said. "I was so scared, scared of betraying Thomas's memory, scared of letting myself feel something again. I was scared too. Terrified, actually, but it was worth it being scared. Look at everything we have built." Olivia looked back at the house, at the warm light spilling from the windows, and thought about their children sleeping safe inside. She thought about the life they had made together, the love they had found in the midst of grief. "We were both so broken when we met," she said. "Both carrying so much pain. And now?" Zachariah asked. "Now we are still carrying it," Olivia said, "but together like you promised, and it is lighter somehow because we share the weight." Zachariah pulled her close, and they stood wrapped in each other's arms, watching the stars wheel overhead. Two people who had lost everything and found each other. Two lives that had become one. Years continued to pass, marked by the milestones of family life. Samuel grew tall and strong, eventually taking over more of the ranch work. At 21, he met a girl in town, a teacher like Catherine had been, and Olivia saw history repeating itself in the best way. They married in the same church where Olivia and Zachariah had spoken their vows, and the reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and dancing that lasted until dawn. Rose proved to be even better with numbers than her mother, and eventually started helping other ranchers with their accounting. She fell in love with the doctor's son and married at 19. settling in Hawthorne but visiting the ranch frequently. James, true to his artistic nature, decided to study art in San Francisco, the first of their children to leave Montana. It was hard to watch him go, but Olivia and Zachariah supported his dreams, knowing that loving someone meant letting them find their own path. The ranch house, which had once been too quiet, too empty, became the center of an ever-expanding family. Grandchildren arrived, filling the rooms with laughter once again. Samuel's wife had twins first, 2 boys who looked exactly like their father. Rose had a girl, then another girl, then finally a boy. Even James settled in California, married eventually and had a son, though they only visited once a year. Olivia and Zachariah grew older together, their hair turning gray, their bodies slowing down. But their love remained strong, deepened by decades of shared experiences, shared sorrows, and shared joys. They were the elders of the family now, the ones everyone turned to for advice and wisdom. On quiet mornings, they still had coffee together on the porch, watching the sun rise over the mountains they had called home for so long. They talked about the past sometimes, but mostly they focused on the present, on the family surrounding them, on the legacy they were building. "I never imagined this," Olivia said one such morning. She was 60 now, her hands marked with age spots, her face lined but still beautiful to Zachariah. "When I got on that stagecoach in Philadelphia, I could not imagine that this would be my life." "Are you happy?" Zachariah asked. He was 66, his hair completely white now, his back stooped slightly from decades of ranch work. But his eyes were still that same striking blue-gray, still looking at her with love. "I am more than happy," Olivia said. "I am content. I am fulfilled. I am loved, and I love in return." "What more could anyone want?" "Nothing," Zachariah said. "Absolutely nothing." He took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers the way they had so many times over the years. 2 people who had been broken by grief and loss had found each other and built something beautiful together. They had honored the people they had lost while creating space for new love, new life. They had carried their grief together, and in doing so, had found that joy could exist alongside sorrow, that moving forward was not the same as forgetting. The Montana wind blew across the grasslands, carrying with it the promise of another day, another season, another year. The ranch spread out before them, the land they had worked and loved and passed down to their children. In the distance, they could hear the sound of their grandchildren playing, the next generation taking root in this place that had become home. Olivia leaned her head on Zachariah's shoulder, and they sat together in the warm morning sun, 2 souls who had found each other in the darkness and had created light together. Their second lives had been good ones, full of love and family and purpose. The grief they had carried had not disappeared, but it had been transformed, becoming part of their story without defining it. This was their legacy. Not just the ranch or the children or the grandchildren, but the proof that love could survive loss, that hearts could heal without forgetting, that second chances were not betrayals but gifts to be treasured. They had shown that it was possible to honor the past while embracing the future, to carry grief without being crushed by it, to find joy again after unimaginable sorrow. As they sat on the porch of the house that had become their home, surrounded by the evidence of their shared life, Olivia thought about the words Zachariah had said to her all those years ago, when she had first arrived as a grief-stricken mail-order bride. "I will carry it with you." He had kept that promise every single day, and she had done the same for him. Together, they had carried their grief, their hope, their love, and their future. Together, they had built a life worth living. Together, they had found that the best love stories are not the ones without pain, but the ones where two people choose each other despite the pain, where they hold on to each other through the darkness until they find their way back to the light. And that, Olivia thought as the sun climbed higher in the Montana sky, was more than enough. It was everything.